Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT13, and BT13 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration of the Armor Rush deck. So the Armor Rush deck is exactly as it sounds. It's going to be mostly an aggro style of deck focused around the usage of our level 4 Digimon and the Armor Purge mechanic. On top of that, we also do have the last update before this one, which was BT9, introducing Magnamon X Antibody as a really powerful level 6 Digimon that we could go into off of our level 4 Digimon, having easy access at being able to climb our stages alternatively. On top of that, because we're now more focused into blue and yellow, we even have some good DNA Digivolution that we could take advantage of, on top of all of the old tools that the deck had before in BT8. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I am going to be running 5 Digitama because we're going to be trying to raise our Digimon out as often as we possibly can to be aggressive with our level 3s and our level 4s. So I'm going to be running 1 copy of Upamon as one of the better draw engine Digitamas for the deck. But as far as the main Digitama of the deck, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Wanyamon from BT11 as the main draw engine, just because this is going to be a little bit easier to get our card draws off of, because the big difference between Wanyamon and Upamon is Wanyamon we could set it up ourselves, where Upamon we're relying on the opponent to have or not have something on the field. Next, when it comes to our rookies, it's going to be a full Veemon lineup. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of the Veemon from BT3 because this is the best and most important Veemon to be aggressive with, just because he has the native jamming ability, so that way he could swing into the opponent's security. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the BT12 Veemon. So the BT12 Veemon, even though we're not going to be running any Imperials, we still have a decent amount of free Digimon that we could run, and we still are also going to be running Davis Tamers, making it so that it's still going to be one of the better search engine Digitamas that we have. Then, on top of that, its inheritable ability also enables our DNA plays. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Veemon. So this is the EX1 version of Veemon, and this is really good, mostly for its inheritable ability to help with our memory generation when our Digimon are becoming unsuspended, which we have a couple of different ways in the deck to be able to unsuspend our Digimon. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 2 copies of the starter deck Veemon. So the starter deck Veemon, even though we're not playing any All Forces to be able to warp into a level 6 Digimon, we're going to be using him mostly for his inheritable ability to help with our overall card draw, just because we're trying to be as aggressive as we possibly can, and sometimes we will run low on our hand count, so this just helps boost our overall hand size, especially in the early stages of the game. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Lanamon. So Lanamon is just a tech hybrid. This could really be anything you feel like you want it to be, but I do like what Lanamon is doing, just because we could use our tamers as basically pseudo level 3s to be able to get some surprise damage in, on top of the fact that she also has a nice ability for when we digivolve up into her to be able to shove our level 3 blue Digimon underneath to give herself jamming and to gain the inheritable ability off of whatever Digimon we're going to be shoving underneath, so that way we can have some alternative lines of play open to us. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Magnamon. So this is the BT8 version of Magnamon, and this does digivolve a little bit more efficiently on top of our Veemons versus digivolving normally, which is why I'm going to be running an all Veemon lineup. This Digimon is a really decent one just because he natively has the blocker ability, so we have some good defensive lines of play, on top of the armor purge ability for some extra protection. Then on top of that, he even has a nice when digivolving ability that both adds some solid offense and defensive capabilities into the deck, allowing this Digimon to unsuspend. So we could do something like swing with our jamming Veemon, knowing that that Veemon is safe, then digivolve that into our Magnamon to be able to gain full benefit off of this unsuspend ability. Then on top of that, it's going to gain a nice plus 2000 DP boost until the end of the opponent's turn for each of our cards with armor form in its traits in our trash. So the longer the game goes and the more armor form Digimon are in our trash, the stronger this card will become. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Magnamon. So this is the BT13 version of Magnamon, and it has that similar Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve on top of our Veemons for 3, even though he natively just Digivolves on top of level 3 yellow Digimon. Then he, like the old one, will also have the blocker ability for some good defensive lines of play, and then what this card is doing is just adding some extra card draw into the deck, where during all turns, when this Digimon would leave the battle area, so it doesn't matter if he's deleted, if he's bounced, returned to hand, tucked underneath something, it doesn't really matter. As long as he's just going from the battle area to somewhere else, we get to draw a card, and then we also get to play a Veemon from our hand or underneath this Digimon's Digivolution source for free, and that'll also be able to trigger its on-play ability as well. So not only is he going to be replacing himself, basically de-digivolving, but a little bit better than Armor Purge, but the card draw on top of that is just the nice cherry to be able to have some good consistency on top of a solid sticky body. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Gold Veedramon. So Gold Veedramon, it digivolves a little bit cheaper on top of our Veemons. This time, instead of 3, it's only costing 2. Again, further incentivizing that all Veemon lineup because all of our Armor Form Digimon want to digivolve on top of Veemons. Then he, like the old Magnamon, will have the Armor Purge ability. Then the reward for digivolving into this card is giving the opponent's Digimon a nice minus 2000 debuff, so he could try to help control the opponent's field. And then if we have a blue or yellow tamer in play, or a card with Armor Form in on its traits in our trash, then we get to have one of the opponent's Digimon with 6000 or less DP not be able to attack or block until the end of the opponent's turn, potentially turning off some extra aggression or defense depending on the current state of the game and what we're being able to target. And then when it comes to the level 5 Digimon, we're not really going to be running a whole lot of level 5s because we don't need to, because most of our aggression is going to be on our lower stages, and we have alternative ways to be able to Digivolve up into our level 6. So I'm just going to be running 4 copies of Shakkoumon, just because it is another free Digimon. We are playing around with a lot of blue-yellow synergy, and this has a nice alternative DNA Digivolution condition that we could definitely take advantage of for some extra aggression by utilizing a blue and a yellow Digimon, which almost all of our level 4s are part blue or part yellow. Then on top of that, his when Digivolving ability actually adds some solid defense into the deck, where if we have 5 or fewer cards in our security, which we almost always will, then we're going to be able to recover 1, so it makes it even harder for the opponent to be able to kill us. Then on top of that, he even has a nice control ability attached to it, where if we DNA Digivolved it into this Digimon, then we get to bounce one of the opponent's Digimon whose level is equal to or less than the number of cards in our security back into their hand, so we have some really solid ways to be able to deal with some of the opponent's threats. Then it even has a nice inheritable ability for our level 6 to take advantage of if we decide to Digivolve from this into a level 6, where it's just going to add nice minus 3000 DP debuff when we're attacking with our Digimon. And speaking of our level 6, next I'm going to be running 4 copies of Magnamon X Antibody. So Magnamon X Antibody is an absolutely fantastic card for this deck, having lots of different ways to be able to utilize it, so that way we can always try to be able to go up into this card. So whether we're Digivolving on top of our Shakkoumon or whatever level 5 that we're going to be using for 3, or just Digivolving from our level 4 Magnamons for 4, allows us to have easy access at making sure we could go into this card. Then what this card is doing is he adds some even more defensive capabilities inside of the deck, where during the opponent's turn, when their Digimon is going to be attacking, if this Digimon has a card with Armor Form in its traits or X Antibody the option in its Digivolution source, then we could redirect the attack to this Digimon. So redirecting just allows us to be able to have an alternative way to block some of the opponent's aggression. Then on top of that, that pairs really nicely with his All Turns ability, where when this Digimon would be deleted, then we get to place this top card into our security stack face down and prevent that deletion, so that way we can try to have as sticky of a board presence and as defensive of a board presence as we possibly can, while we're being able to try to aggress onto the opponent. And then the last Digimon and only level 7 of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Jesmon GX. So Jesmon GX is a really interesting card for this deck to use because it's basically acting like the BT5 Omnimon, except a little bit better. So his Wind Digivolving ability allows us to be able to place a Royal Knights traded Digimon, which Magnamon is a Royal Knights traded Digimon, from our trash underneath him to the bottom of his Digivolution source and activate that Digimon's Wind Digivolution effect, which we're trying to use the BT8 to be able to unsuspend and gain a sizable DP boost. And then on top of that, he's going to have the Blitz ability, so when we pass turn, we're going to be able to attack with this card right away. Then on top of that, he even has a nice All Turns ability, where while this card has Royal Knights in its traits in its Digivolution source, this Digimon gains the Piercing, Blocking, and Security Attack +1 ability for each card. So the more Royal Knights we're able to stack underneath him, the stronger this card will be able to punch for some really solid damage. And then when it comes to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Davis. So this is the BT3 version of Davis. This is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixer, and it's one of the best memory fixers in the whole game, just because its on-play ability is adding extra consistency, allowing us to look for a blue and a green Digimon and add them into our hand. We're not running any green Digimon. We have the ability to run some blue-green Digimon to be able to add extra targets. And then the other tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Davis and Ken. So Davis and Ken is going to be acting as our green source for one of our options that we're able to run inside of the deck, on top of the fact that we still, again, could potentially run a green Digimon to try to make a better use of this card's passive memory generation. At worst, we're still going to be able to gain 1 for having a blue Digimon on our field, but if we have a green, then we'll be able to gain an additional 1 to have more memory to do with whatever we need to. But the real appeal of this card is its secondary ability, where when one of our Digimon digivolves into a 2-color Digimon, doesn't even matter what color they are, then we get to suspend this tamer to unsuspend that Digimon, allowing us to have extra ways to be able to get some unsuspends, so we could use either offensively or defensively. And speaking of our offensive tools, next I'm going to be running 2 copies of Fire Rocket. So even though we're not running any red tamers or red Digimon outside of Jesmon GX, this is still a fantastic card for us to use just because it's a cheap way to try to boost our overall damage output. We could use this card regardless of its color, as long as we have a Digimon with armor form in its traits in play, and as long as our Digimon has 2 or more colors, which all of our armor form Digimon do, then we're going to be able to give that Digimon security attack +1 to be able to punch as hard as we possibly can. Then its security ability is also pretty solid by allowing us to be able to get rid of the opponent's defensive options by deleting one of the opponent's Digimon with the blocker ability. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall because this card is so good, it got limited to 1. This is just here to help us try to stall and buy more time, so that way we have better ways to be able to line up our power turns to try to aggress as hard and best as we possibly can to make it some kind of a comeback, just because its ability allows us to apply to all of the opponent's Digimon a nice debuff of when they attack, not limited to once per turn, they're going to lose 2 memory, really limiting the amount of aggression that the opponent is going to be able to come at us with. On top of that, its security ability acting like a hammer spark on just gaining us 2 memory is still a solid effect because that could still take away 2 memory from the opponent, putting them off their tempo. And speaking of tempo, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Blue Memory Boost. So Blue Memory Boost is just another consistency tool, trying to dig through our deck for our blue Digimon, while setting up the secondary main ability of Delay to be able to gain 2 memory at a later turn, so we have more powerful lines of play available to us. And then as far as the main removal option of the deck, that's going to be delegated to 2 copies of Megadeth. So we have to have Davis and Ken on the field in order to use this card, unless it's going to be coming out of the security, acting as our main security threat, just because this is one of the best and cheapest removal options that we have access to, allowing us to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon and bounce one of their suspended Digimon back to their hand for a lot of really solid usability on how we could remove and deal with the opponent's threats. And then the last option of the deck is going to be one of the more important options, and that's going to be 3 copies of Awakening of the Golden Knight. So Awakening of the Golden Knight, like Fire Rocket, allows us to use this card, ignoring its color requirements, as long as we have a card with armor form in its traits in play. We could use this card most of the time just because a lot of our level 4 Digimon and level 5 and 6 are going to be part yellow anyway. But regardless, this card is really solid because we get to digivolve any of our armor form traded Digimon into a card with Magnamon in its name from our hand, ignoring its Digivolution requirements and ignoring its memory cost as well. So that way we have alternative ways to be able to go into any of our Magnamons. Then on top of that, it's even adding some extra protection where the Digimon, while it digivolved off of this effect until the end of the opponent's turn, can't have its DP be reduced, so that way it's a little bit harder to be able to deal with whatever Magnamon we're digivolving into off of this card, which ideally we're going to try to utilize with our Magnamon X Antibody. And then when it comes to the overall game plan and gameplay of the deck, it's not the most complicated deck in the world, just because we're trying to be as aggressive with our lower stage Digimon the best that we possibly can. So when it comes to the usage of our level 3 Digimon, well, this is where we just have a ton of flexibility because for the most part, it realistically doesn't matter. The best one that we're going to want to be aggressive with is going to be our Veemon from BT3, just because it has the built-in jamming ability, so that way we could swing with this card and then be able to digivolve into something like our Magnamon to be able to get his Digivolution ability off to be able to unsuspend, or with some of our various other cards, that's where the Davis and Ken comes in handy to be able to make that same type of maneuver where we're going to swing, chip at the opponent's security, digivolve into an armor form Digimon, suspend our Tamer to be able to unsuspend our Digimon, and continue the aggression. Then on top of that, as far as the usage of our others, we're mostly going to be utilizing them for their inheritable abilities. So that's where the starter deck of Veemon comes in handy for the early game, so that way when we raise it out, we could digivolve it right away, start swinging, and be able to draw cards as best as we possibly can. And then we also have the EX1 to be able to take advantage of a lot of the unsuspends off of our Magnamon, or off of the unsuspend ability off of our Ken and Davis. Then we also have the BT12 as a way to just try to help search some of our tools, because a lot of our Digimon are free, on top of the fact that it just enables our DNA play with our Shakkoumon. So it really doesn't matter how you're going to be utilizing your level 3s as a result, as long as you're just utilizing them. Then when it comes to the level 4s, again, it really doesn't matter how you're going to be utilizing your level 4s. Lanamon being the hybrid is just the alternative win condition most of the time when we're being super aggressive, just as a way to be able to utilize our Tamers or our extra Tamers, or if we wanted to, we could even use it to try to set up a Shakkoumon if we have a level 4 already sitting on our field. Then the level 4s that are going to be mostly sitting on our field are going to be our Armor Form Digimon, which all have Armor Purge or some built-in protection to be able to try to have a sticky body around when we're trying to be aggressive, while also having additional defense. And then from this type of a position, we're going to be able to utilize our Magnamons to be able to potentially digivolve into our X Antibody, just because he has that alternate Digivolution, or if we did set up a DNA, and that's kind of why the Jesmon GX is just a nice alternative card for us to use, because we could digivolve it on top of our Magnamon X Antibody, and the best card we're going to want to tuck underneath it is going to be our BT8 Magnamon, so we could take advantage of its when digivolving ability to get that extra unsuspend, so that way we could try to be aggressive with our Magnamon X Antibody, digivolve the Magnamon X Antibody into Jesmon GX, tuck underneath the Magnamon from BT8 to be able to unsuspend, then with Blitz, make a big attack, just because we're going to have 2 Royal Knights underneath, so he's going to be punching for 3 security by default most of the time. So he's just the alternative way to be able to try to deal a lot of extra damage really quickly to put the pressure on. So you could kind of see a lot of the synergies in place on being as offensive and defensive as you possibly can, borderline at the same time, thanks to how the Magnamons are wanting to be played. And then we have a whole bunch of other tech and tools that we could think about leaning into, all depending on what you have access to, the tech and tools you want to utilize to try to best counteract whatever your expected meta is going to be. So we do have some other Veemon rookies that we could lean into, like a BT2 for some extra card draw, or a BT8 to try to help dig out our 2-color blue Digimon, which a lot of our Digimon in the deck that we're trying to utilize kind of are. Then we do have all of the old armor forms that stem off of Veemon that we would want to utilize. So we do have Lydramon, and we also have Flamedramon for their own respective color uses on top of their own respective abilities to try to help push the overall aggression for the deck. And then we do have some other decent level 5 Digimon that we could think about leaning into, like Mermaimon, just to try to have alternative ways to be able to climb our stages as efficient as we can make them. But we also do have access to other DNA Digimon, like Chimeramon, as other really solid ones we could lean into, again, depending on what your approach to this style of deck is. Then, if we wanted to, we do have some All-Forces we could think about teching into, just as some more generically good level 6 Digimon in blue, that we could also try to take advantage of the Warp, depending on our matchups, to be able to have easier access at alternative level 6s for their various different uses. But if you do just want to run something a little bit more on the generic side, we do have Kazuhamon as a really solid one that's fitting within our color combination of blue and yellow that the deck seems to want to be leaning into, not only to try to help it utilize our options a little bit more efficient or effectively, but also to try to help us separate our stack to be able to create more stacks and more bodies, putting more pressure onto the opponents that they're going to have to deal with. Then we do have alternative level 7s that we could lean into, like Death Exmon is just one of the most splashable level 7s. And then if we are leaning into a more Imperial-focused build, utilizing some Imperial tech and tools, we also could think about utilizing Paladin mode as just another solid level 7 to try to best complement that, or just be its own solid standalone level 7. Then blue has some other really good ways to remove some of the opponent's threats, and we have a slew of different options to be able to pick from, depending on if we want to bounce cards back to their hand, or tuck them underneath, or do various other different things, like try to stunlock their Digimon as well. Then we could even think about utilizing some off-color cards, like Heaven's Judgment, as a good removal tool we can use as well, just because of the color combinations we're playing around with, and the fact that we want to be playing around with different colors. Then we do just have a whole bunch of other tech and tools that we could think about utilizing, like Kaiser Nail, to be able to split apart our stack and be able to spawn more and more Digimon that the opponent is then going to have to try to figure out how to deal with. But we also do have Armor Texture as another really cute card to be able to combo with in its own right to try to swap it between our different armor form Digimon and try to gain some various different benefits for being able to incorporate this card. While we also do have a slew of different tamers and even off-color tamers that we could think about leaning into, we don't necessarily need to, but sometimes some of those different tamers could help depending on the types of abilities you're trying to gain. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.